This story happened in the summer of 2011 when I was only 14 years old. To give you a better picture, my family owned a remote piece of land in western Maryland. It was private property deep in the mountains where almost everyone living nearby was related to my family in one way or another. I grew up there running around with my cousins, and I always believed it was the safest place in the world. But a fateful day by the Savage River shattered that innocent belief forever. It was a sweltering summer afternoon. My cousin, who was 1 year older than me, and I decided to go for a walk along the rugged dirt path that follows the rushing Savage River. My cousin was a little junior entomologist, so he spent the whole time with his eyes glued to the ground, looking for bugs or crawfish. I just strolled along beside him, enjoying the sound of the water hitting the rocks. Everything seemed normal until I heard a very distinct sound. A sharp click echoed through the quiet air. It wasn't a branch snapping, and it wasn't the sound of stones hitting each other. I whipped my head toward the opposite bank of the river. Not even 15 feet away, a stranger had just stepped out from the thick brush. He was wearing a black jacket and holding a camera that was still pointed directly at me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw his large frame and felt the terrifying certainty that he was staring right at me. Then, he smiled. I knew he was smiling because I could see his teeth clearly. His shoulders shook slightly, and a low, muffled laugh drifted across the water. Before I could even react, I heard another click. He took a second photo. I flinched and stepped back, but I froze. Then, he lowered his camera, kept that same smile on his face, and slowly wagged his index finger back and forth. The gesture was unmistakable, exactly like the way an adult wags their finger when scolding a child for doing something wrong. I didn't know what that signal meant, but my heart started racing. Next, he pointed down at his side. I followed his hand and saw a knife sheath attached to his belt. Then, he brought his hand up to his throat and slowly, deliberately, drew his finger across it in a slit throat motion. In that moment, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't think of anything specific. I only had one reflex. I lunged over, grabbed my cousin's arm, and screamed, "Run! Run now!" As soon as we turned to bolt, I heard a third click behind us, followed immediately by the sound of water splashing. Splash! Splash! He was wading through the river, coming after us. I sprinted for my life through the dense bushes, my heart pounding like it wanted to jump out of my chest. The path back home was full of rocks and slippery roots. In my total panic, I tripped over a dry branch and fell face first into the dirt. I hit the ground so hard that I could taste the thick, metallic flavor of blood in my mouth. I had bitten through my lip. My knees and hands were stinging, but my fear was 1,000 times stronger than the pain. I wasn't on the ground for even 3 seconds before I scrambled back up, pulling my cousin along as we kept flying. I swear I could hear branches snapping right behind me. When the campsite finally appeared ahead, my legs were nearly numb. My breath was ragged, my throat was bone dry, and my lip was swelling up from the cut. I ran straight into the middle of the adults and told them everything. I described his throat slit gesture in detail, using both my words and my hands. My grandfather didn't ask many questions. He and a few other men in the family grabbed their rifles and headed toward the river path. The atmosphere turned incredibly tense. They searched for 2 hours. When they came back, they shook their heads and said no one was there. They found no suspicious signs at all. When my mother heard this, she sighed. She looked at me with a stern expression and said I was probably just panicking and letting my imagination run wild. "Look at how you've hurt yourself just being so worked up," she said. Of course, I argued back immediately. I tried to explain that I fell because I was running for my life, but she wouldn't change her mind. I turned to my cousin, hoping he would confirm what we saw, but he just looked at everyone and then at me with a confused expression. He scratched his head and said he only ran because he saw me running, but he didn't notice anything else. He hadn't looked at the riverbank, and he didn't hear the camera because he was too busy looking for bugs. That was the moment I learned what it felt like to be completely alone. I stood there under the skeptical eyes of my family, feeling a horrible sense of helplessness. The thing I wanted to do most right then was kick my cousin. 15 years have passed, but I still remember every detail of that man's appearance and his gestures. I always think about those photos he took. I wonder where they are now. Am I sitting in some collection somewhere, captured in a moment of pure terror? I still go back to that campsite with my family every year, but I don't feel comfortable there anymore. I'm always on guard. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. The only thing I'm certain of is that it happened. It was real. I still have a small scar on my lip as a reminder that this memory wasn't just a figment of my imagination.
My name is Hal, and I am 30 years old. My girlfriend Emily and I are both freelancers. Our lives are never rooted in one place. We live full-time in our van with our 2 dogs, working and traveling across the United States. But sometimes, that freedom comes with risks I never truly expected. I will never forget the fateful day of January 24th, 2023. That day, we were camping in a very remote area in Texas. From early morning, the sky looked gloomy with heavy gray clouds. We turned on our NOAA weather radio to keep track of the situation. At first, we thought it would just be a normal thunderstorm, maybe a bit loud, but it would pass. But the air inside the van suddenly felt suffocating when the radio announced, "Tornado confirmed in the orange sector." Emily looked at me, startled. She rushed to check the weather radar on her phone and gasped, "How? We are right in the middle of that orange zone." I looked at her, worried and speechless. An orange zone meant high danger. A tornado was very likely to hit. We started discussing a plan to move, but everything happened too fast. The wind began to howl, and rain poured down like a waterfall, slamming against the sides of the van. Emily completely panicked. She kept asking me, "Where do we go? What do we do? I can't stay calm, Hal." Because Emily was so upset, I had to force myself to stay level-headed, even though I was just as terrified inside. Our 2 dogs huddled in the corner of the van. They could sense the tension and the danger in the air. I quickly assessed the situation. The only road out of the area was already blocked by fallen trees and flying debris. Initially, we decided to hunker down inside the van, hoping it would be strong enough to protect us. I pulled Emily close, trying to reassure her that everything would be okay. But that tiny bit of hope was cruelly crushed. The radio blared an emergency alert. "A large and extremely dangerous tornado has been located in the area. Complete destruction is possible. Take cover immediately." The phrase, "complete destruction," echoed in my head like a death sentence. Suddenly, the van didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a thin tin can waiting to be crushed. Emily began to sob, clutching me and the 2 dogs as if it were the last time. Then, the peak of the horror arrived. A strange sound came from the distance. At first, it was a low rumble on the horizon, but within seconds, it amplified into an earth-shattering roar. "What is that? Is that a train?" Emily screamed through her tears. The roar sounded like dozens of freight trains charging toward us at a terrifying speed. I realized that was the freight train sound people always use to describe a tornado. It was headed straight for us. The van began to shake violently against the force of the wind. Everything inside flipped over, shattering across the floor. I could feel the van being lifted, tilting to one side. In a split second, I realized staying in the car was suicide. The van would be tossed like a dry leaf, and we would die inside it. "Move! Get out now! To the back!" I yelled. Pure instinct took over. I threw open the back doors of the van. The wind immediately rushed in, blowing our belongings out into the storm. We grabbed the dogs and leaped out of the van into a storm that was tearing the sky apart. About 10 yards away, there was a shallow drainage ditch filled with swirling mud and murky water. We dove into it. I pushed Emily and the dogs flat against the bottom of the ditch and used my own body to shield them. In that moment, I heard the sound of metal being torn apart right above my head. The screaming wind wasn't just wind anymore. It was the roar of a monster swallowing everything in its path. Dirt, rocks, branches, and pieces of our van flew over us. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the freezing, muddy water soak into my skin, silently praying for a miracle. "You're going to be okay, I promise. We're going to make it," I whispered in her ear. It felt like it lasted forever, but in reality, it was probably only 5 to 7 minutes. The eye of the tornado passed, the train sound faded away, and all that was left was heavy rain and the haunting silence of a battlefield. When we slowly lifted our heads from the mud, the landscape was completely unrecognizable. Our van was flipped on its side, twisted like a piece of crumpled paper. Nearby storage buildings had been leveled into piles of brick and scrap. But somehow, we were still there. Emily, the dogs, and I, all of us were soaked, shivering, and covered in mud, but no one was seriously hurt. We held each other tight in the middle of the wreckage, crying tears of joy because we were alive. The decision to leave the van at the last second saved our lives. If we had stayed inside for one more minute, the outcome would have been unthinkable. In that life-or-death moment, love and survival instinct led us to make the right choice. My name is Sarah. It has been 3 years since that snowy night, the night that was supposed to be a romantic new beginning, but instead became a deep psychological scar that makes me afraid to ever open my heart again. It all started on a dating app. Among hundreds of profiles, he stood out like a classic gentleman lost in the digital age. His messages were polite, his vocabulary was sophisticated, and he had a charming old-school look that completely fooled me. We texted back and forth for an entire month before I finally agreed to meet him on an evening just before Christmas. I looked forward to that date like a child waiting for a gift. I chose a simple navy blue dress, put on light makeup, and felt my heart pounding as I walked into the small, candlelit bistro he had picked out. During dinner, his behavior was almost too good to be true. He pulled out my chair, listened intently to every word I said, and smiled with a warmth that made me feel truly special. We talked about movies and old jazz records. I thought to myself, finally, I found a decent man. After dinner, he suggested a walk around the historic district. That night, light snow fell on the awnings, and Christmas lights twinkled against the pavement while soft music drifted from the shops. The scene was like something out of a Disney movie, and I was genuinely enjoying every second of it. As we walked past a couple laughing happily on the other side of the street, he suddenly stopped. He pointed at them and whispered into my ear, "They are definitely cheating on someone. Look at the way they laugh. It's so fake." I froze for a second, intending to laugh because I thought he was joking. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw an extreme seriousness. His eyes were narrowed with pure contempt. I stayed silent and kept walking, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease in my chest. We turned onto a quieter street where the streetlights were further apart. He began to talk about his family and his childhood. His voice remained steady, but the stories started to get chilling. "My father was a strong man," he said. "Sometimes he hit my mother, but in the end, men have to do that once in a while to keep order in the house. It wasn't really that big of a deal." I stopped in my tracks and stared at him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I grew up in a home where my father never even raised his voice at my mother, so these words were a horrible insult to me. I frowned and said softly, "No real man ever hits a woman." I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just felt it would be wrong to nod in agreement. I thought he might explain himself or say he didn't mean it that way, but his face transformed. His eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened. I knew he was angry, but I never expected what happened next. There was a moment of haunting silence, and then he suddenly screamed, "You don't know a damn thing!" The scream echoed through the quiet air, making me jump back in shock. Before I could say a word, his hand lunged forward. He gripped my arm so hard I felt like my bone was going to snap. A split second later, a massive slap slammed across my face. My ears started ringing, and I tasted the salty tang of blood in my mouth. I stumbled and slipped on the snow, trying to run away, but he was faster. He lunged at me, using his fist to strike my shoulder, while screaming nonsense and insane insults. The gentleman from an hour ago had turned into a monster with a face twisted by rage. I could only curl up, shielding my head and sobbing in total shock. I honestly thought I was going to die right there. Luckily, my screams caught someone's attention. A group of people walking nearby ran toward us. An older man rushed in and grabbed him, pulling him off me. A young woman knelt beside me and asked if I was okay, but I was too traumatized to answer. He was still struggling, his eyes darting around like a psychopath. But as soon as the older man yelled, "Call the police, right now!" he suddenly froze. He looked up at the snowy sky, let out a long, eerie laugh, and then turned and bolted down a dark side street. I stayed on the ground, unable to calm down. A couple stayed with me. The girl comforted me while the guy called the police and described what had happened. I felt ashamed, terrified, and furious all at once. The woman helped me stand up. She was kind and told me it wasn't my fault and that I didn't do anything to deserve this. The police arrived shortly after. I told them everything between gasping breaths. But when they asked for his identity, I realized with horror that I knew nothing. I only knew a name that was likely fake on Tinder, a burner phone number, and some vague details about his job. They said they would try to find him, but since he had fled, it would take time. I felt completely empty. I went home alone in the freezing, snowy night. The bruises on my arm and shoulder throbbed every time I moved, but the scar on my soul was the thing that would never heal. I opened my phone, looked at the dating app icon, and deleted it immediately. The police called a few times after that, but they were never able to track him down. To be honest, I don't know if they'll ever find him. All I know is that I will never forget that night. My name is Mandy, and I am 32 years old. My story is about a terrifying experience I had with online dating. Everything happened 3 years ago. At the time, I was living alone in a small apartment in Greensboro. Sometimes, the loneliness of being a single woman makes you make bad decisions. Instead of using Tinder or Bumble like my friends, I chose Facebook dating. I had a weird thought. The less popular the place, the fewer bad people there will be. After browsing profiles for a few days, I was impressed by a guy named Oliver. His profile picture was very handsome, a sharp jawline, short black hair, and a kind smile. Looking back, I realized that photo was too perfect. It looked like a stock photo downloaded from the internet. But back then, my loneliness blinded me. We messaged back and forth for 2 weeks. Oliver knew how to keep a conversation going, even though we mostly talked about boring things like work and office coffee. However, he always avoided personal questions with vague answers like, "My work is just really busy," or "I'm in the middle of moving." After 2 weeks, Oliver and I set a date to meet in person. We chose a local gastropub. Oliver arrived 10 minutes late. The moment he walked in, I froze. The man standing in front of me looked nothing like his photo. He was scrawny, his hair was thinning, his nose was sharp and bent to the left, and his skin was as pale as someone who hadn't slept in years. His shirt was wrinkled, and his shoes were covered in dust. He looked completely disheveled. Oliver sat down across from me and said very naturally, "You look even prettier in person than in your photos." He acted as if there was no lie about his appearance, behaving like we were old friends who had known each other forever. I wanted to stand up and leave right then, but I tried to be polite. He kept ordering drinks, cocktail after cocktail, then wine. I started getting tipsy before I even realized it. When I felt too lightheaded to stay, he paid the bill and insisted on driving me home instead of letting me call a taxi. I made a huge mistake by saying yes. The car ride was silent. When he stopped in front of my house, he didn't unlock the doors. Instead, he turned to me with a smirk. "Do you want to have a little fun before you go inside?" I immediately told him to open the door. But Oliver leaned in closer. The smell of alcohol and cheap cologne overwhelmed me. Come on, Mandy, you've been flirting with me all week. Don't tell me you're backing out now. When I firmly refused, his voice changed completely. He sighed, but his hand stayed tight on the door lock button. I don't get it. Why did you waste my time if you weren't going to give me anything? I kept saying no and showed him how angry I was. Finally, he acted annoyed and unlocked the door. I scrambled out of the car and almost fell onto the sidewalk. Behind me, I heard him mutter, "Stuck up bitch," before he sped off, leaving me shaking. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. The next morning, a bouquet of roses appeared at my back door with a scribbled note. "Sorry about last night, I was too drunk. Please forgive me, Oliver." I threw it in the trash. However, every few days a new item would show up. Chocolate, scented candles, stuffed animals. All of them came with apologies. At first, the gift seemed like a sweet gesture, but after a short time, they started to terrify me. The breaking point was when I found a bottle of perfume on my doorstep. It was the exact brand I used back in high school, a detail I had never mentioned to him. In that moment, I realized a horrifying truth. He wasn't just following me. He was digging through my trash, or maybe even sneaking into my backyard to watch my private life. He even sent me a text threatening to give me a surprise at midnight. I lived in fear, but I was also full of rage. I didn't call the police right away, partly because I was embarrassed and didn't want more trouble. I asked my brother to help me change the locks and install security cameras, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. The gifts kept coming. Finally, I decided I had to end this myself. I borrowed my brother's handgun and took a photo of myself cocking the hammer. After printing it out, I wrote a note in red ink. "The next time you step foot on my property, this is the last thing you will ever see." I put the photo in an envelope and placed it exactly where Oliver usually left his gifts. The next morning, the envelope was gone, and so was Oliver. He never came back. For a long time after that, I lived with a mix of relief and fear, worried that the silence was just the calm before something worse. 3 years later, fate brought me face to face with Oliver again. While I was having dinner with my husband, I saw Oliver standing at the bar. He was already thin, but now he looked even more gaunt and aged. When he saw me and realized who I was, he hurriedly threw cash on the table and ran out. I didn't feel happy or victorious. I just felt a cold shiver run down my spine, thinking that out there, on some dating app, another woman might have just swiped right on him. I could only pray that she would never be foolish enough to get into that car, and that she would never have to live in fear like I did. My name is Lena. I'm 32 years old and live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm told I'm attractive and I'm doing well financially, but I'm still single. Unlike most women, I have a deep obsession with flowers, but not in a good way. They remind me of a relationship that killed my ability to trust in love. When I was 26, I lived in Mason Ridge, a small town in northern Ohio. I had just gone through a painful breakup after a 3-year relationship. I found a new job at a local art gallery, and my life was finally starting to feel normal again. Then I met Ryan. He owned a small flower shop called Hale's Blooms. Even though it was tucked away on a street corner and wasn't very big, the way Ryan designed and arranged his shop was incredibly eye-catching. One afternoon, I stopped by the shop to buy flowers for an upcoming art gallery opening. That was the first time we met and had a chance to talk. 2 weeks later, Ryan asked me out to dinner. Things moved very fast. He made my life feel bright again, as fresh and gentle as the flowers he gave me. We started dating. The first 3 months were a beautiful dream. Every single time we saw each other, Ryan gave me a perfect bouquet. He took care of me the way he took care of his tulips, meticulously, carefully, and sometimes a little too intensely. Once, Ryan looked deep into my eyes and whispered, "You don't ever need to change a thing. You are exactly what I like." The first sign of rot appeared in the 4th month. One afternoon, I dropped by the flower shop without calling first. When I walked in, Ryan wasn't at the counter, but I heard him in the back storage area humming a sad, dark tune. Ryan was standing perfectly still. The floor was covered in carnations. He was clutching a bouquet so hard his knuckles were white, staring at the flowers with a look of pure disgust. When he saw me, he forced a smile, but it disappeared a second later. He looked back at the bouquet, his face twisting in anger. "These aren't right," he muttered. Then, he suddenly snapped a stem, then another. He kept doing it, faster and faster. "Ryan, why are you doing that?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. "I hate things that are ugly and wilting," he said. His words froze me in place. I just watched as he broke every single flower. When he was done, he looked up at me with empty eyes. Then, he smiled and went back to his usual kind self in an instant. He walked over and gently touched my cheek. "You are so beautiful, so don't worry. I will never break you." A shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't tell if that was a romantic promise or a threat. After that day, Ryan began to change. If I didn't answer his texts within a few minutes, he would send dozens more in a row. He started showing up at my office without warning, saying he just wanted to make sure I was okay. He called constantly to ask what I was doing and where I was. His attention didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like control and obsession. One night, I was exhausted and fed up, so I canceled a date with him. I called my two best friends, Alicia and Ben. They had been telling me to break up with Ryan for a long time, and this time, Alicia was firmer than ever. We met up and made a safety plan for the breakup. I would meet Ryan to end things, while Ben and Alicia watched from their car parked right across the street. 2 days later, I went to Ryan's flower shop. When he saw me, he looked thrilled and ran toward me. I cut him off before he could say anything. "Ryan, I can't do this anymore. We need to stop seeing each other." Ryan stood still for a few seconds, staring at me. His happy expression twisted into a distorted, jagged grin. "When you say things like that, you look really ugly." Before I could react, his hand shot out and gripped my throat. I panicked, clawing and struggling to get away. But the more I fought, the tighter he squeezed. My vision started to go dark. "You have to stay beautiful. I won't let you wilt," he hissed through his teeth, his eyes wide and insane. Just as I was about to pass out, the door burst open. Ben and Alicia charged in. Ben tackled Ryan, tearing his hands away from my neck. Alicia grabbed me and screamed that she had already called the police. Ryan struggled and screamed in Ben's grip. "She's mine! She's my flower! I can't let her wither!" The police arrived quickly and restrained him. Ryan never stopped screaming. At the station, I found out Ryan had a criminal record. 2 years earlier in Columbus, he had nearly killed a woman after she broke up with him. Because his family was wealthy, they hired expensive lawyers, and he only got probation and mandatory therapy. This time, there was no way out for him. The court sentenced him to 12 years in prison for attempted murder. I spent many months in therapy after that. The sensation of being strangled haunted me every night. It took years of treatment to learn how to breathe normally again. 5 years passed, and I moved to Cleveland, thinking the ghost of that night had finally faded. Until one day, I got a message from one of Ryan's former employees. He told me Ryan had been released early for good behavior. He had opened a new flower shop in Akron. Not long after, he started dating a girl named Elise. But a week ago, Elise was murdered by Ryan. She was found in a bathtub with her neck snapped. Hearing that story made me tremble as the horror of that night came rushing back. I was inches away from suffering the exact same fate as Elise. Ryan is now locked away in a psychiatric prison, likely for the rest of his life. The doctors concluded he has a severe personality disorder. To him, people aren't human. They are just flowers to be preserved and controlled.
My name is Joseph, and I'm 22 years old. Something happened 3 years ago that still sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. After I graduated from high school, I decided not to go straight to college. Instead, I started working at bars and pubs around the city. My original plan was to work for just 1 year to save up some money, experience the world, and then figure out my next move. But the year flew by quickly. I got used to the work and the rhythm of the nightlife, so I decided to stick with it. I started as a server, then learned how to bartend, eventually became a shift lead, and finally made it to general manager. This industry has a strange pull. It sucks you in before you even realize it. 3 years in the bar scene was enough time for me to see almost everything. I thought I was tough enough to handle any situation that could happen in a pub, until St. Patrick's Day last year. That day, the bar opened at 10 a.m., but I arrived early to get everything ready. As soon as I pulled up, I saw a massive crowd gathered outside. Most of them were men, and many were clearly already buzzed even before they stepped inside. They were laughing and shouting, their voices mixing with the music pumping from the surrounding bars. Almost everyone was wearing greens, sporting Guinness logos, and wearing pointy leprechaun hats with fake orange beards. Some people even wore plastic leprechaun masks, bright green, distorted faces with frozen, creepy smiles that were both funny and unsettling. In my line of work, remembering faces is a vital skill. It helps you track how much someone has had to drink so you don't overserve them. But that day, hundreds of people looked exactly the same in a sea of green outfits and fake beards. Just looking at the crowd made me exhausted, and I had a bad feeling that this shift was going to be rough. By the middle of the shift, the bar was packed to the brim. The music was blasting, glasses were clinking constantly, and the mix of laughter and screaming created a wall of chaos. I was moving non-stop behind the bar, pouring beers, mixing cocktails, taking cash, and answering questions. Suddenly, a guy approached the bar. He was wearing one of those plastic leprechaun masks that covered his entire face. Unlike the cheap, flimsy ones, his was thick and hard. The eyes were just two deep, dark holes, and the smile was fixed in a terrifying way. He stood right in front of me without saying a word, just staring at me through that green plastic. I asked him what he wanted to order. He mumbled something, but between the loud music and the mask, I couldn't hear him. I asked him to take the mask off so he could speak clearly, but he shook his head and signaled for me to lean in close. When my ear was just an inch away from the plastic, he whispered in a cold, thick British accent, "A pint of Guinness." If you know anything about Guinness, you know you can't pour it all at once. I tilted the glass to a 45-degree angle, filled it about 2/3 of the way with the dark liquid, and set it on the counter to let the head settle. This is a standard process that takes about 119 seconds to get a perfect pour. But when the glass was only partway full, I saw him start to get agitated. He waved his hand aggressively, his anger very obvious. "Hey, you trying to rip me off? Why is it only half full? Give it to me now." I tried to give him a professional smile and explain that the foam needed to settle. He cut me off, his voice dripping with hatred. "You're mocking me, aren't you? You think I'm some kind of idiot?" He started spiraling out of control, shouting insults so loudly that the customers around him began to back away. I knew that serving this guy more alcohol would only make things 100 times worse. I took a deep breath and used my most polite manager voice. "Sir, I'm afraid I can't serve you anymore. I need you to leave the bar immediately." In that moment, everything changed. He went dead silent. No more screaming. He just stood there, looking at me through the empty eyes of that mask. Then, in a voice that was terrifyingly calm, he said, "I'm going to kill you." I thought I had misheard him, but he kept going in that same flat, steady tone. "I'm going to wait outside until this place closes. I'm going to wait for you to walk out, and then I'm going to kill you. I live right around the corner. I can go home and get a kitchen knife in less than 10 minutes. I don't care about the cameras, and I'm not afraid of getting caught, because by then, you'll be dead, just like you deserve. For a few seconds, my mind went completely blank. I was still holding the unfinished glass of beer, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to pull myself together and instinctively reached out to rip the mask off his face. I needed to know what he looked like so I could call the police, but he moved fast, backing away and dodging my hand easily. He raised his hand in a small, mocking wave goodbye, turned around, and disappeared into the crowded room. I immediately stepped out from behind the bar and asked a coworker to cover for me so I could go find him. I pushed through groups of people, checking every leprechaun mask and every green-painted face, hoping to recognize his build or his movements. I searched for 15 minutes, but he was gone. In that sea of identical costumes, he had vanished like he never existed. The rest of my shift was the longest night of my life. Every time someone in a leprechaun mask walked toward the bar, my chest tightened with fear that he had come back. I kept checking the clock, counting down the minutes until closing time, and worrying about the walk to my car, the dark corners, and the empty spots on the street. His words kept looping in my head, especially the part about the knife. For the first time in my life, I truly felt like my life was in danger after work. It wasn't just a random thought, it was a heavy, cold fear that made my hands shake even in a crowded room. When the bar finally closed, I didn't dare walk to the parking lot alone. I asked a coworker to walk me to my car. I scanned the area intensely, watching every shadow in the distance. It wasn't until I was inside my car with the doors locked that I finally exhaled. I barely slept that night. I imagined every possible scenario, from his waiting at my front door to the police knocking the next morning. However, the next morning, I woke up just fine. There were no reports of an attack, and no one was at my door. I was safe and able to go to work like any other day. I never found out who he was, and I'll never know if he actually meant to follow through on his threat. Maybe he was just a drunk guy talking big who forgot everything the next morning. But maybe things almost went a very different way. The thing that haunts me the most isn't the threat itself. It was the absolute calmness in his voice. I don't work the St. Patrick's Day shift anymore, even though the pay is better. And every time I remember that night, I'm just thankful I made it home safe, and I'm still here to tell the whole story.
My name is Elaine. This happened 6 years ago on St. Patrick's Day when I was 19. The whole city was dyed green. I was out with my older sister and a few best friends, starting the night at a packed Irish pub. People were wearing clover hats and green scarves so loudly that you had to shout into someone's ear just to be heard. I drank a little too much at the start. I wasn't blacked out, but I definitely had a buzz going. When the group decided to head to a second bar, I tapped out. I had an early shift the next morning, so I figured I'd had enough. Around midnight, I told my sister I was heading home. My apartment was only a few blocks away, and the streets were crowded with holiday crowds. I figured walking alone wouldn't be a big deal. The March air was cool and crisp. Music spilled out of the bars and mixed with the voices of groups passing by. I stopped at a 7-Eleven on the corner to grab a bottle of juice. As usual, there were some sketchy-looking guys hanging around that corner, but I lived there and was used to it, so I didn't think much of it. However, as soon as I left the store and turned onto a deserted side street, the silence became eerie. I heard footsteps. They weren't the casual steps of someone taking a stroll. They were heavy, deliberate thuds right behind me. I looked back and froze. A large man was walking straight toward me with a look in his eyes that made it clear I was his target. My breath caught in my throat. Instinctively, I pulled out my phone and pre-dialed 911, but I didn't hit call yet. I tried crossing the street to see if he was actually following me. He crossed immediately, staying right on my tail. At this point, the road was leading away from the busy downtown area. Turning back meant facing him head-on. I had no choice but to run. I ran as hard as I could in my high heels. The sound of my heels hitting the pavement was sharp and loud, mixing with my heavy gasping. He sped up too, his heavy boots thumping right behind me. In that moment, I went into a strange state of shock. My brain laid out a plan. I had to beat him to my front door. But one thought was even stronger than the fear of being caught. I cannot let him see my door code. If he gets the code to the building, I'm dead. It's strange how in a life or death moment, my mind focused entirely on those 4 digits. My building didn't use physical keys for the main entrance. You had to punch in a code to get into the lobby, and then use a key for your actual apartment. As soon as I reached the door, I spun around. I used my hand to cover the keypad and used my whole body to block his view. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the numbers. I had only pressed the 2nd digit when the man slammed into me. He used his body weight to try and shove his way inside with me. Normally, I'm a pretty shy person, but in that moment, I snapped. I started screaming and cursing at him, using the harshest words I knew to tell him to get lost. He didn't look scared. Instead, he just gave me a disgusting, smug smirk and told a bold-faced lie. "No way, you know I live here too. Just give me the code, don't be so selfish." He kept laughing and pushing, trying to force me into the lobby. In a panic, I held up my phone screen with 911 ready to go, waving it in his face like a winning card. "Get away from me right now or I hit call and the cops will be here in 2 minutes. He looked at the screen, then at me. That confident, creepy smirk vanished. His eyebrows bunched up in annoyance. There was a long, tense silence. My heart was pounding and my whole body was stiff. Then he finally stepped back. Without saying another word, he turned around and disappeared into the shadows at the end of the block. I dove inside, ran straight to the elevator, and deadbolted my apartment door. I checked the locks 1,000 times, my limbs still shaking uncontrollably. I called my sister, but she didn't pick up. Terrified, I called my boyfriend. Instead of being worried, he just laughed it off. He told me the guy probably just liked me and wanted to tease me a bit. That heartless comment kept me awake all night, feeling angry and abandoned. The next morning, when my sister saw all the missed calls and I told her what happened, she went pale. She revealed a detail that made my skin crawl. Back at the bar, she had a terrible feeling about a man sitting across the room who wouldn't stop staring at us. When we compared descriptions, it was the exact same guy. She confirmed that the second I left the bar to go home, he had vanished too. He had hunted me from inside the pub and followed me for blocks, just waiting for the moment I was alone on a dark street. 7 years have passed since then. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been fast enough, or if I had been careless enough to let him see my code. I realized then that a woman's intuition is a life-saving gift, and sometimes pure rage is the best weapon against a monster. I also learned a hard lesson: never downplay someone else's fear, because behind a joke or teasing could be a dark plan that someone was lucky enough to escape by a hair.
So, I'm Tyler, and it's been like 6 months since everything happened. I fought like hell to make it back here. Even though I was physically okay, I was totally freaking out inside, and my heart felt ice cold. My girlfriend died right there during our picnic, and I saw her get murdered right next to me. My girl's name was Violet, and I was planning to pop the question. I'd kept it all on the down low, and everything was going perfect. One gorgeous weekend in November, Violet invited me out to Lake Berryessa to go camping. "Tyler, I'm so pumped. I want to see the gate to hell," Violet said. For anyone who doesn't know, the gate to hell is what locals call this massive whirlpool that shows up when the lake water gets high. This whirlpool was made by this cool overflow system that helps control all the extra water in the lake. We rolled up to the campsite with food that Violet made herself. "There's no one here but us, Tyler," Violet said, checking everything out with a big smile. I looked around too, and she was totally right. I joked, "I booked the whole place just for us," and we both cracked up. We ate and chatted, and I was about to finally do what I'd been thinking about for months. I dug into my pocket to grab the ring box, and my heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. "Tyler," Violet called out, and I jumped, dropping the ring box. She reached out and grabbed my arm, looking confused as she stared behind me with wide eyes. "Violet, what's up?" I asked, turning around, and there was this tall guy wearing a black hoodie and sunglasses, so you couldn't see his face at all. He was holding some metal thing in his hand. Hey," I shouted, but he just ignored me. "Need any help?" I tried to sound friendly, but as he got closer, we saw that he was holding a knife. Violet was freaking out and holding my hand tight. "Call the police, Violet," I whispered while standing in front of her. But Violet looked totally frozen and didn't seem to hear me at all. We were kinda at his mercy, so it was probably best to just go along with what he said for now. I didn't want anything bad to happen. I figured this was just gonna be a regular robbery after handing over all the car keys, my wallet, and phone, but nope. "Tie up your boyfriend," that crazy man told Violet. At that moment, Violet was scared. Her face was pale, and she was shaking like crazy. Following the robber's orders, Violet tied my hands with my belt. Then, that bastard tied Violet up too. We were made to lie face down on the car hood, facing each other, and Violet just started crying. "Chill out. Everything's gonna be fine. I'm always gonna be right here with you, okay?" I tried to comfort her, but I was freaking out too. Violet bit her lip hard, trying to hold back her fear, and nodded. Those were the last words I got to say to Violet. She suddenly let out a scream of fear and pain as the first stab hit her hard in the back. The second, third, and fourth stabs came. Violet's screams got weaker, and all I could see were her eyes, filled with pain and despair, looking right at me. My heart stopped. I was breathing heavy, and my throat got all choked up. I couldn't say a word. A wave of horror hit me as I saw that awful scene, and my eyes filled with despair. I felt completely helpless. Pain and anger shot through my heart, and there was no way I could save the person I loved. I gripped the engagement ring box tight in my hand, like I was squeezing my own heart. That bastard stabbed Violet 10 times. He laughed and pointed at me. Just like Violet, he gave me 8 stabs and then casually walked away. I'd mustered up a little strength and tried to yell for help. A moment later, a dad and his kid who were fishing by the lake heard me and helped call the cops. My memory went blank right then. I woke up in the hospital to the gut-wrenching news that Violet had died from deep wounds and blood loss. The police asked me to give a detailed description of the killer. White guy, about 5 feet tall and around 170 pounds. Besides the black hoodie and sunglasses, he was dressed in all dark clothes. Oh, and there was this symbol on his shirt, a circle with a cross over it. That was all I could remember about the guy. According to the police, he was a serial killer known as the Zodiac. Violet and I were the victims of his third case, but somehow I'd made it through. After that awful shock, my mind went totally blank. Every night I was haunted by Violet's last image. Her desperate eyes and bloody body kept showing up in my dreams, and even when I was awake, I felt like a total zombie. My heart was ice cold, and any shot at finding joy again felt completely hopeless. I couldn't shake the guilt of not being able to protect the girl I loved, and it felt like a mental wound that would never heal. The helplessness, bottled up anger, and pain of loss were crushing me, making me feel scared and empty, not knowing how to deal with reality after everything fell apart. The story is based on a true tale about the Zodiac Killer's third case. On September 27, 1969, 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard and 20-year-old Brian Hartnell were on a romantic camping trip at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. They went through the most painful and terrifying moments of their lives when they ran into Zodiac, the most mysterious killer ever. Even though the police found some more clues the killer left behind at the scene, they still couldn't figure out who he really was, even now.
I'm a 36-year-old single programmer living in Florida, having a messy look. That night, I pulled a late one, working till 10 p.m. to wrap up a new project. My stomach was growling like crazy, so I walked over to the In-N-Out by my office to grab some dinner. After chilling and eating for like 30 minutes, I went out front of the In-N-Out to grab a cab home. Empty, quiet streets, late at night, really get people in their feels. I ended up thinking about my job and the whole single life thing. "Get lost, bitch," some guy was yelling and cussing, which totally caught my attention. Right by the little alley next to In-N-Out, a couple was having some drama, but it was all kinds of toxic. The guy wasn't just cussing her out, he was also pushing her around pretty badly. I was shocked, took a sec to think, and then just kept quiet. Figured it was their business. "Get out of my life. Why are you so damn stubborn?" The guy was totally losing it. Weirdly, the girl wasn't crying or acting hurt. She just kept saying sorry and barely pushing back. I couldn't just ignore it anymore, so I walked up and said, "Shouldn't do that to a woman, fam." The guy stopped as soon as he saw me. He went from all pissed off to kinda happy and confused, like he was about to say something, but couldn't. But in the end, the guy just took off, totally surprising me. He hauled ass, like he was trying to get away from something really bad. "You good?" I turned to the girl and helped her up. She was tiny and skinny, wearing a loose dress, with her long, messy hair all in her face. After I helped her up, the girl got to her feet, said thanks, and brushed her hair out of her face. She had a ton of makeup on. Her eyes were super big, but her lips were the total opposite. Her face, neck, and arms were covered in a bunch of scars, long and short. Some were still bleeding from the stuff her boyfriend did earlier. Her breath was heavy and kind of forced, like she was pulling the person in front of her deeper into a trash can. Without thinking, I covered my nose and took a step back. The girl grinned and walked up to me, saying, "Thanks a lot." My stomach did a flip. No problem. And I bolted out of there before I tossed all the In-N-Out I just ate. I got home with that awful smell still stuck in my nose and feeling sick the whole time. I jumped in the shower real quick to shake off the tiredness and gross feeling. The next day was another long one, so I decided to take the bus home instead of driving. As soon as I got on the bus, I was shocked to see the woman from yesterday. She flashed a big smile when she saw me and waved. I was gonna turn around and get off the bus, but it was too late. The doors shut and the bus took off. I picked a seat as far from that woman as I could, but her eyes were still on me, and her hand was still waving with that weird smile. Everyone else on the bus was staring and talking about me, so I figured I'd just get off at the next stop and grab a cab home. After that day, I stopped taking the bus, but that was just the start. The next few days were full of crazy, creepy obsessions. The next day at work, that girl was waiting for me right in front of the office. As soon as she spotted me from a distance, she ran over all excited and eager. I froze for a sec, totally freaking out. Why the hell is she here? Facing the girl, I tried to calm my breath and keep my face cool. "I've already said you're welcome, so we're done here. I hope this is the last time we cross paths." I just said my piece and rushed into the office before I could even catch my breath. That night when I left, I couldn't see the girl anywhere. I let out a big sigh of relief. As soon as I walked in and flipped on the light, my phone buzzed. "Hi, it's me. Come hang out for a bit." The voice on the other end was a girl, all soft and sweet. I grabbed the phone, opened the door all confused. "Why are you here?" I said, totally surprised, while the girl just waved, all happy. Seeing the infected, gross wounds on her face totally made me feel sick. "How do you even know my address and number? Please, I'm seriously asking you to stay away from me, all right?" "What if I say no?" She challenged me with this sweet and cheerful vibe. She was getting more and more under my skin, pushing my patience to the limit. I stormed into the house and slammed the door, thinking I'd give her one last chance before calling the police. That last chance was the next day, right in front of the In-N-Out, just like the first time I ran into her. "Anthony!" She even knew my name and yelled it out. "Get lost!" I yelled, totally pissed off and fed up. The more she saw me lose it, the more she seemed to get a kick out of it, giggling and slowly getting closer. I couldn't control myself anymore, and for the first time, I actually snapped at a woman. I yanked her hair, all gross and dirty, and shouted, "Get lost! How many times do I gotta say it?" Then I went off on her just like that guy did that night, and I was the one watching it all go down. A strong shove sent me flying, and someone yelled, "Knock it off, jerk!" A young guy. I was all mixed up at first, then got pumped and ran off real quick, because I found someone to take her place. After I bounced, the girl got up, flashed a big smile at the guy, and you could see a couple more fresh scars on her face, bleeding. I am Maria, 37 years old. I've spent 20 years dealing with therapy sessions and popping endless sedatives. I guess I'll just have to stick with them forever. Sounds pretty rough and hopeless, but I'm one of the lucky ones out of the 50 poor souls taken down by that highway menace, Robert Ben. When I was 17, I met Mike, a boy from the next class, and fell for him real quick. But both our families were totally against us being together. When we were all about impulsive thoughts and crazy decisions, Mike and I decided we were going to run away from home. We planned to meet up on the highway, brought some clothes and cash, and figured we'd take off for a few days. Right at 9 p.m., Mike and I met up, and we hugged real tight, all hyped and happy. We kicked off the trip by hitching a ride with some trucker. The truck pulled over pretty quick, and the driver, all friendly, hopped out and asked us what was up. Well, what are you two doing out here at this hour?" He was like my dad's age, had a deep voice, and his face was uneven. His mouth was crooked to the left. "I'm Maria, and this is my boyfriend, Mike. Can you give us a ride to the next city on this highway?" I got straight to the point. "Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Hop in." The driver was cool about it and quickly jumped in to show us the way. I had barely taken 3 steps when Mike grabbed my hand and yanked me back. "Maria, I think we should grab another ride." Mike was iffy and looked kind of freaked out. "What's up, Mike? We don't have much time. You think our parents won't catch us here?" I was rushing and getting a bit annoyed. But he kept staring at your boobs. "Cut it out, Mike. You can't talk like that about someone who's helping us." I pushed the thoughts aside, didn't pay much attention to how Mike felt, and jumped in the car. Mike quickly ran over, hopped in the front seat to split me and the driver up. I shot him an annoyed look, and we took off. I could hear metal clanging together nonstop from the back of the car. Mike and I looked at each other, probably with that curious look, and the driver finally spoke up. "The door latch is kind of loose. Haven't had a chance to fix it yet. Hope it's not bothering you two." Then he looked at me and gave me this weird smile. No, we're good," I quickly said. I still don't know your name. Ben. That's what everyone calls me. Full name's Benjamin Wilson. I smiled back, but seeing how tense Mike looked threw me off. What's up? Mike heard me and jumped, then turned to look at me but didn't say anything. He pulled out his phone, and a few seconds later, my phone buzzed with a new message. Maria, you hear someone moaning? I froze, tried to listen real close, then out of nowhere, I could feel warm liquid on my arms and face, and a strong, nasty, fishy smell hit my nose. It took me a few seconds to turn to Mike. He was hunched over. His neck had a deep gash, and everything was covered in red. The driver was holding a sharp knife, just grinning at me like he was having a blast. I freaked out, mouth wide open, but no words coming out, and Mike's scared eyes were full of pain and hopelessness. The truck's too cramped with 2 people, the driver said, then slammed on the brakes. I was dying to get out of there, wanted to run, but the car door was locked. Don't do anything dumb unless you want to end up like him. Immediately after speaking, the driver forcefully pulled Mike out of the car, further enlarging the wound on his neck. That was the last time I saw Mike. He got left on some empty road. I screamed, ready to fight back, but my weak ass just made him more excited. He popped open the trunk, and with one big push, he shoved me in, his bloody hands still all over me. I was freaked out. My body just froze up. This trunk was like a nightmare, full of chains, clamps, leather straps, all kinds of twisted stuff. There was a girl trapped by that sicko with all that stuff, and it was pretty obvious what he was planning to do. Just thinking about that stuff makes it hard to breathe. On top of that, in the corner of the truck, there was this girl, naked and tied up so tight she was bleeding all over. She was gasping for air, barely hanging on, fighting through the last miserable moments of her life. I was gonna take her place, and that's when my 7 days of hell started. Pain, fear, hate, obsession. But not once did I give up on trying to escape. One evening, I begged him to let me have my fave Popeyes burger, and maybe because I'd been good the past few days, he actually said yes. I used every bit of strength I had, just desperate to escape the chain, but my wrist got all torn up. I quickly ducked into a dark corner instead of running, because that sicko would have found me in no time. When it got light, I ran out to the main road, hoping to get help from people in cars, not trucks. I got saved and finally came to after 2 weeks in the hospital. I told the police everything I went through. Benjamin Wilson got life without parole, but honestly, that's nothing compared to the hell he put innocent people through. As for Mike, they never found his body. This story is based on a shocking case in the United States, where the perpetrator, Robert Ben Rhodes, was revealed to be a notorious and repulsive serial killer, with over 50 victims spanning 2 decades, from 1970 to 1990. On average, that means he would kidnap and murder 3 women every month. A former truck driver, he would often target victims along highways before taking them to the room right behind his truck. Robert Ben became a monster, largely shaped by his family's circumstances and the disturbing things he witnessed as a teenager. Although he was arrested and sentenced to the maximum punishment, the pain and horrific crimes committed by Robert Ben continue to send chills through the American public.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.